Hey guys, I'm Reagan Elkins. We're starting a new podcast series with local filmmakers in the Oklahoma area. We may even branch out and talk to some people that are outside of Oklahoma, but we want to talk to Andrew Smith today, who is a cinematographer here in Oklahoma, does all kinds of cool projects, and talk about projects we've worked on, some of the hurdles, some of the crazy things we've endured, and his artistic style and all that stuff. So let's get into it. Andrew and I go back a few years. We've known each other for quite a while. We've only worked with each other for, how many years now? A few?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably 3 years.
Yeah.
Ish.
Probably around there. So it's been fun. Worked on quite a few different types of projects, music videos and short films and things like that. So we're going to kind of go down memory lane. I also want to talk about your artistic process. What your methodology is behind going about a scene and things like that. But let's start with just kind of your background. So tell me about yourself, Andrew, and what you do.
So my name is Andrew Smith. I'm a cinematographer. I grew up in Duncan. I'm in Oklahoma City now. So
a Duncan demon, bro.
Yeah. So I kind of got started in the high school there. There was a guy named JD Taylor that was the video instructor at Duncan High, and it's kind of ironic because I didn't actually go to school there. Yeah. I was homeschooled, but he kind of allowed me to get started and kind of learning how to edit on his machines. Yeah. And he would bring me in for doing switching on like high school football games or running camera op on like middle school talent shows. And
wow.
And so as I started to learn more about the different aspects of things, growing up, didn't really have a ton of money to afford my own editing suite. So he would let me into the office to be able to work on his multi-$1,000 edit suite. And
was it like what do you call those old versions? It was digital? I mean, it was digital.
It was still nonlinear.
Yeah. Okay.
We did shoot some Betacam, and I think we did one project that I had gotten hired to do. I wasn't the one operating or anything, but it was like a 16 mil project. And I was like,
Avid?
so cool.
Is that what you? Avid?
No, we weren't on Avid. He had a Final Cut 7.
Okay.
And then I was editing at home on an older machine with like iMovie.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I learned the basics. And then I was like, okay, how do I turn this hobby that I've had for a long time into a career?
Exactly. How do I make money on this?
Because I was like, I love this so much. It doesn't feel like a job.
Yeah.
But I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it's also a lot of fun.
If you grow up doing video like this, like I did, and I mean, we grew up very similar. I was homeschooled as well and all that stuff. So I just made stupid videos with my brothers, you know? And so as you get older, you start to do more and more projects. You get more interested. You're like, how do I turn this into money? How do I turn passion into, a career? So yeah, I totally get that side of it. So I didn't realize that you you did school stuff. And so what was like one of the first projects that you did that just seemed like the thing and like kind of took you off in your career?
That's a good question. I think one of the big like pivotal moments for my brother and I, because he's also involved in film, and he was my first AC, which is assistant camera.
Yeah.
They pull focus and kind of run the camera team in a way. We did a project together we had a homeschool talent show that everyone kind of despised that had to be a part of it. They were like, okay, well, we're drafted to do this thing.
Yeah.
What if we wrote and made a short film so that everybody involved would not have to do their own individual thing? So it was a collectivist sort of mentality of like, okay, if we do this thing together.
Genius.
And so the group of us kind of wrote and made this whole kind of our own take on the Pilgrim's Progress.
Oh, nice.
And it was a 20-minute thing. I think half of that or more was just the outtakes that we included.
Yeah.
But we just had so much fun doing that. I was an actor, and then I helped edit, and we barely got it done in time for to show to, but people loved it. It was awful. I don't know if there's still a copy floating around somewhere, but that was,
Sure.
I think it was like 15 at the time.
Yeah.
And we just had so much fun making that. And it's just like, oh, okay, well, this is like a really fun collaborative way to tell stories. And none of us had done anything like that before.
Yeah.
I've played around with doing some like stop motion,
Dude,
little,
yes.
Legos and things
Yeah.
like that. But it's just like nothing serious or nothing that actually became like this project to show.
Right. I did a
And-
stop motion one time with Star Wars action figures to the song Jukebox Hero.
Nice.
It was like action figures doing this. Jukebox Hero. They were playing guitars and I made out of cardboard. It was awesome. So, yeah. I'm sure your stop motion wasn't as cool as that, but, it is what it is.
Everybody has to start somewhere,
Exactly. That's cool. Though. So as you got older, did you go to film school? Did you do anything like that? Or what was kind of the thing where you started getting into like the industry?
Yeah. So originally I thought, visual effects would be really cool to get into.
Yeah.
And I kind of taught myself After Effects. There's a guy, Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot.
Yeah.
OGs know.
Of course.
And that was just such a inspirational thing that I was like, okay, this is really cool, like process of, taking an idea in your head and just making something.
Right.
And I always kind of had artistic inclinations. I have an aunt that she's a painter and she does some really cool artwork and creative mind. And I just didn't have the patience for certain types of mediums. And I think, like stop motion's one of them. Ironically, I work with Kyle Roberts, who's done a ton of stop motion work. And so like, as you find out what you like in your creative endeavors, you find what you can be obsessed about. And I think that is where time kind of becomes non-existent. You forget to eat. You do like, you just pour your heart and soul into something.
Yeah.
And I think that if you don't love something, you're not going to make the best version of it.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of how I've approached life, is like, how can you find something that you love so much you just forget about time and just pour yourself 100% into it?
Absolutely, man. I remember many of those nights growing up. We made a stupid video during the day, and I would just stay up all hours of the night trying to finish it. You know what I mean? Because that was the thing that made me tick. And I wanted to see the completion. It's like a puzzle you're putting together, but there's something even more meaningful behind it, something you're creating from the beginning. So I totally get that. Yeah, where you don't care, you forget about food. It's not that you don't care to eat, but it's like you just forget about all of it. You go through the entire day because you're so wrapped up in the story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah, I get that, dude.
And so going back to your question about film school, I went on a missions trip to Honduras and made a 20-minute documentary about that process. We were digging wells and using a lot of copyright music, which
Nice.
you're not supposed to do, but
You got to learn one way. Or another.
So I mean, we weren't necessarily using it to put in a festival or anything. It was more of like a fun trip video for our friends.
Sure.
And but they used it like to try and recruit other people to go down and dig wells and like help out at the school that they had established there. And I have one of my friends that like moved down there like permanently. So I was like 19 at the time, made that video, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I still wasn't 100% sure of I had a lot of opportunities on the table. My dad was doing like remodel work, and I was helping him out with that, and knew I didn't want to do that into old age as a career.
Yeah.
But I think I'm so blessed to have all these different experiences, because it helps develop your work ethic and teach you these valuable skills that you can apply to other things.
My early years, getting through college and, high school years and all that stuff, I laid sod for a long time. I mowed lawns. I helped do a little bit of remodeling house. I'm terrible at that type of stuff, but I helped out. It was all manual labor. And so that did kind of mold where I am now, even though I do a lot of sitting when I'm editing, you know.
Right.
But when I'm on set, you know, you get in there and you work hard, you know. And I think that's kind of, I mean, it's a good work ethic to have. I think it's an Okie trait too, because like we just get in and get stuff done, and especially in the
Absolutely.
film industry, I think people don't realize like the types of work ethic that we have here in the film industry, because a lot of people grew up the same way.
Right.
Manual labor, you know, we were raised, you know, to work hard, to, you know, to get things done, and that we bring that to the film industry too.
Absolutely.
You know?
Well, I mean, this is an industry that is, you have to have a lot of grit. You have to have determination, tenacity to be able to weather the storms, you know, because Oklahoma's not just Tornado Alley, but it's like for the film industry, you know, it'll be like really great one year, and then it'll be crickets the next.
Exactly.
So
exactly. And I'm hoping to see more. We're seeing more projects coming in. And I heard like the rebate. We're getting a bigger rebate and that type of stuff, which is good. But you're exactly right. Like there, a lot of times it's feast or famine. You know. So how do you get past it? So people got to pivot a lot.
Right. Well, and like you said, you have developed skills. You have a studio here in Chickasha. Like you have multiple sort of avenues for revenue to come in to feed your family, you know?
Right.
So
yeah. And that's kind of, you know, when I started getting into the feature film world in 2018, 2019, I worked in it a long time, did a lot of locations work. And, you know, that was one of the reasons why I started my own production company, is because it was either I'll have a job that's paying really well for a few months, and then it's crickets, like you said, nothing for a while, and you're texting people, hey, you got any work, blah, 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 or I might go do a scout for a week or whatever. And that's what ultimately got me to start this more media corporate stuff. Now, I love telling stories, and I try not to be like the typical media company where it's all just corporate-y look and super polished. I like the gritty look and more cinematic type stuff. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why I started this, because it was ups and downs. So I have so much respect for people that just weather the storms, and you got to get your name out there. You got to send the messages. And if you got to go out of state to do some work, you do what you got to do.
Right.
You know? So, but what would you say? Okay. So like one of the first calls that you got that was like a feature film, what would be like your first feature?
So I worked on a documentary, kind of a docudrama with OCCC and the Chickasaw Nation. I don't think it ever really saw the light of day. But Greg Malott was directing. He was one of the writing instructors at OCCC, and great dude. But that film, I was a Steadicam operator, and I had been doing a little bit for my own work and commercial work. And I was just so excited to have this opportunity.
Yeah.
And like, it was such a good experience learning for me. And I think because it was so difficult on me as a Steadicam op, like you're wearing a heavy piece of equipment all day, doing really long takes, and in Oklahoma heat. And, you know, we actually had somebody on set that was, that had heat stroke, and it's like, this is like dangerous, you know? And, you know, fortunately, like you and I have had remodel experience and been out in the heat, and, you know, I don't probably roof some houses. I have, I think that sort of like conditioning you have to have, so that you can even hold up, and
absolutely prepares you for it.
And so, not to say that I'm tougher than anyone else, because I'm definitely not.
Sure. But you have to have that though, like growing up in Oklahoma and, you know, working those manual labor jobs prepares you for that. My first feature film, we had some dude, first day, my first feature film, I'm location managing. Should never have had that job. Somehow we got through it. It was crazy. First day, some dude passed out, heat stroke, terrible. So like, what the heck are you going to do? It's 110 degrees outside. So you got to be drinking gallons of water, you know, and people that are not from Oklahoma, they don't realize that. But I mean, the reasons why you would film here, there's so many reasons. It's diverse. The landscape is beautiful. You can go to a desert, or you can come here and have farmland, or you can go to trees and winding rivers. There's so much diversity, you know, in the type of environments that we have. So there's plenty of reasons to film here, but on top of that, you have the individuals that you would hire that have the grit to get it done. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
To work hard at it.
Well, there is so much talent here, and there are so many diverse types of locations. You've worked locations, so I'm sure you're even more aware than I am of like all the options.
Sure.
You know,
And you never know what you're going to get called for either.
right.
You never. Oh my gosh, some of the questions I got. I remember one specifically. They were looking for, it was 2021 or something like that, and they were looking for a house that looked like it could have been built in the 1920s, tiny, sitting out in the middle of a field all by itself. I'm like, that's still structurally sound. I was like, maybe you just should build it, So it's all kinds of crazy things, and we would find stuff. Believe it or not, in Oklahoma, you could find all kinds of stuff. And like right here, we're sitting on Chickasha Avenue, and we worked on a project that filmed 100% in and around, which is a project that we worked on together that you did some camera operating on, called Cowgirl Song, and we filmed 100% in and around Chickasha, and so many of the scenes were right here on Chickasha Avenue. So many.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And you just walk outside, and the director, Tim, he goes, I've never experienced a scenario where we spent 2 days and scouted the entire movie, and we locked in our locations. I'm like, yeah, welcome to Chickasha.
Amazing.
Welcome to small town Oklahoma. You know what I mean? So there's so many different benefits for stuff like that. So yeah, for your first project, after that, did you start getting phone calls, or how did you kind of build your way up into doing it full time?
I think from that project, I met a lot of really cool people on that shoot. That some of them I still work with to this day.
Yeah.
And so like some of those people, because they were forged in fire and were able to make it on the other side of that, they were, like they had that Oklahoma grit that we were talking about. And I think having those connections and long-standing collaborators has been such a blessing, because it's those people get you the next jobs. If you're cool to work with, then it's great to, get to work on other projects. Like you and I have worked together. And I think it's always valuable to have new people that you're creatively like-minded to collaborate with, because they'll inspire you in ways that you might not have thought about before. Everybody has their own sort of mentalities of how they approach life. And
absolutely,
I love that. I think it's the best part about being human is like when you meet somebody else that's similar enough, but then they have this other set of like values or like creative inclinations.
Different perspectives.
Yeah,
absolutely. That kind of leads us into how we started, working together. Same scenario. I mean, it's all about making connections and meeting new people. I remember meeting you and your brother on America, Dinesh D'Souza documentary or whatever.
Yep.
And it was at OCCC, and I was actually an extra that day. So I wasn't working on the crew, but I was an extra. And I think maybe half a second of that entire day that we shot, it made it into the final cut. So it was super great. But I remember meeting you and your brother. I remember we exchanged numbers. And then out of the blue, your dad calls me. And I ended up on a 2-hour phone call with your dad because, love your dad. And, he talks and he'll talk to anybody. He's never met a stranger.
That's true.
And I guess my mom's from Duncan area. And so my grandma, I guess they had met or something like that. And my grandma gave your dad my number, and he calls it, hey, my son works in the film industry, blah, 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 blah. And we kind of hit it off for a little bit.
And his name is John Cena.
Yeah. It was awesome. So at that point, it was like, okay, I know this guy, and he's worked on a bunch of stuff. But at that point in time, I was doing baby tiny things. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Little tiny corporate projects. I may bring in a few thousand to $10,000 a year or something like that. So film was such a side thing. And I'd love to, for other filmmakers who may be watching this, I want to kind of talk about some of the hurdles that we had to overcome. And this is every freaking project that anyone works on. There's going to be stuff that you have to overcome. That's where the Oklahoma grit comes in. That's where problem solving comes in. How are you going to get through that problem? Because a lot of things that you encounter, you're not planning for.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you go out on your scout day or whatever, you go, and a lot of times on my shoots, we don't have scout days. We just go out and shoot it. You know what I mean? But we go out and you might think of a bunch of different potential hurdles you have to jump over. But when you're filming on the day, the sun may go down.
Yep.
And you're behind schedule. What the crap are we going to do? And that was exactly the scenario with Darcy Lynn's project, Push Our Luck.
Right.
So you're a DP, I'm directing, producing, John Lewis is gaffing. We've got a good team, but we still have this shot that we haven't got to, and we need the sunlight.
Right.
And the sun goes out. It goes down. We're like, crap. And it wasn't one of those, like sometimes you can kind of pivot and say, oh, well, we'll just scrap this and we'll kind of pick something up later, or we'll shoot it really tight. We needed it to look like daytime. So maybe talk about that. If you remember that process, what was that like?
Yeah. So I think going into any sort of problem like that, you start to think through the hierarchy of like, okay, what's the best possible option here? Yeah. And then what is the bare minimum that we can get away with, Exactly. And so I think when you get to that place where you say, okay, we've got this problem to solve, which was we needed to shoot the parents of Darcy, her film parents, in this, living room scene, and it's supposed to be daytime as she's leaving the house. And if you remember, like we talked about that, and I was like, okay, we have enough. And that's a conversation that I had with John Lewis, who's our gaffer on that. Yeah. I was like, do we have enough lights to kind of shoot this if the sun goes down? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And so having talented people like that on the team that can be like, okay, this problem that you have is a huge problem in your mind, right? As a director, you're like, okay, this could totally ruin the entire look of the film. And if we don't have that scene, then we can't pick it up later because we only have 2 days to shoot this whole thing. Yeah. And so when you find yourself backed into this corner, right, having those options of like, okay, and there's always more than one way to do it. Yeah. And usually there's 45 wrong answers of how to do that. And there's like one or two right answers. Right. To solve that problem. And so we're like, okay, we'll shoot that later on in the day so we can get all of these other pieces, and then we can shoot the driving stuff after that. Exactly. And because we knew we needed some night driving scenes, and it just, if you can sort of find out what those problems are before they are immediate and urgent, that is the secret to maintaining your level of peace on set.
Right, exactly. And from the director's side, okay, it's like this is the beginning of the film where she walks down, she's stopped by her parents, and like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And so it's kind of a point of tension immediately in the film. From the producer side, I hired these actors, and this was the only scene where the parents were in there. At the very beginning. So we have to, they drove from Oklahoma City. I paid them a rate. Right. They came all the way down for this scene. This is not something that we could scrap at this point. You know what I mean? And so we had to have it, but no sunlight. Yeah. So you're immediately like, all right, John, let's get these lights up and let's make it look like daytime. And from my perspective, it looked awesome. It looked perfect.
Thanks.
So you guys absolutely killed it. But that's an example of having to pivot when Mother Nature doesn't want to play along. You know what I mean? Or when we're not playing along with Mother Nature. You know what I mean? Exactly. It's like when you're behind schedule, things happen, and the sun goes down. You're like, crap. What are we gonna do? So I applaud you guys for that one. That was a big one for me. The next project that I remember we worked on, among many, would be the 48-hour short film. And this was back in 2023. We did, we got a team together, wrote the script all within 48 hours. And we pretty much, on the camera side, it was you and me, buddy.
Yep.
Which I'm not a first AC. I am terrible at all that stuff. And, Jacob Blue, what up, Jacob, was our grip. We had a few PAs. Could have used Blake. Well, Blake Bennett actually was there.
Blake was there, but he had to leave early.
Yes, Blake had to leave early, and he was also freaking acting in it.
Right.
So I remember there was a few moments where poor Blake, love him to death, he was in actor mode, and you needed another hand, and Blake gets over there and like, don't worry, I got you, bro. And so that was a pivot kind of moment. But I remember like our conversations that we would have. I was thinking as producer, like, oh, let's get through this. Or, and director, let's get through this. We got to keep going. But you're like, bro, you kind of brought me down in a good way to reality and said, if we haze this room up, I promise you it's going to look so much better. Do you remember this conversation?
Yeah.
Where we went back and forth. I was like, we don't have time and blah, 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 blah. We got to keep going. All this stuff.
Right.
He goes, dude, haze it up. And sure enough, you hazed it up.
Magic.
And it was magic.
Yeah.
You had the layers, you had the depth and all that stuff. And so what was your thoughts overall of that project? I mean, it was madness,
right.
Obviously, the whole project was, which is kind of the nature of a 48.
So when you called me to do that, I had this like sinking feeling in my stomach because I remember the morning of, I was driving up to Chickasha. I was living in Duncan at the time, but
yeah,
I was driving up to Chickasha. It's like 45 minutes drive. And you called me and you're like, hey, I'm going to email you the script, but it's not the one that we're going to use. And I was like, I just paused and I was like, okay, this is a 48.
Yeah.
Should I turn around right now? Like, cause I'm not that far from my house. We could just call it right here and not embarrass ourselves.
Exactly. If we're changing everything like morning of, like, oh man. Yeah.
So I was like, well, Reagan's a friend. I'm just gonna go up there and we'll see what kind of mess we can get into. And I had at that point, my expectations were they weren't even on the floor. I think we had dug a hole and like buried them already.
Yeah. Gone.
And
Absolutely.
So I think that's the sort of level of like, humility of like, hey, we're going to make something creative.
Yeah.
And your expectations, just throw those away, but give it 100% because failure is
always an option.
It's always an option. And it will, as long as you and your team are willing to fail forward together.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, if you don't want to be innovative, if you just want to copy somebody else's model, it's not going to be as wasteful because, there's already a model in place for you. You can just be hyper efficient and you already do what works.
Yeah.
And you just copy and paste what you want to do. But real innovation, real creativity, it takes a lot of like effort and you're going to waste a lot of time and energy on something.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot, not just one problem, but an entire
plethora of problems. Yes.
Layers of problems, right?
Yeah.
And I like to say that life is like a box of puzzle pieces, and none of us get any corner pieces.
Yeah,
and that's what creativity is to me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Creativity is like that.
Yeah,
like true creativity, trying to be innovative about something, is you don't get any corner pieces. You might have a few ideas of what makes good design, like the golden ratio or whatever. Yeah. So there's these certain like concepts that are throughout like what we perceive as beauty or whatever. But for you finding how to apply that into your unique situation is what makes it interesting. That's
Absolutely.
something hasn't been done exactly the same way before.
Exactly. And all that can be molded by so many different factors too. It could be the location that you find yourself in. You know what I mean? How do I make this room look beautiful
Exactly.
to the eye? It could be how many actors are in the room, what your blocking and all that stuff looks like. Well, we need to come away from the wall. We need to do this, that, or the other. How do you mold it? It's like a canvas. How do you paint this beautiful piece of art, but in 3D space for us,
Right.
with the depth and the dynamics. And on top of all those things, it's capturing the other form of art, the acting too, the emotions in the face and the eyes and all that stuff, and making a compelling story. There's so many different factors that people do not freaking understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then once you have the post-production, you have the music, you have all these different elements. That's why I love filmmaking, dude. Exactly what you're talking about. There's so many different elements that that go into creating this artwork. It's so many different puzzle pieces that you really do. You don't have a corner. It's not really set. This is how you're supposed to do it. So many different factors can change how we set up a scene, how we film a project. And it was kind of what we saw in the 48 hour. We had this beautiful location, large stage, but we didn't have a crowd of people.
Right.
So there's no coverage of the crowd. So it's all audio in post when we have claps and all that stuff. But we utilized the stage production, like the lighting and stuff that was already there. So that came in handy. So that's a good location if you have a lot of things that are already set for you.
Right.
That's
I don't think we could have made it otherwise.
No, it wouldn't have happened. We didn't have the lights that we
didn't
needed.
have the manpower.
No.
Like even if we had all the lights in the world,
Exactly.
sometimes you just don't have the resources to employ all those.
100%. And what's funny is we shot at that same location. It's the stage at the local college for a movie, and we had all these lights brought in. You know what I mean? So we had backlights, we had all this crazy stuff that brought in, and it took the majority of the day just to set it all up. You know what I mean? So utilizing the lights that they already had, I'm super grateful that we were able to do that. Was so much, it helped us get through the day so much faster. And, obviously hazing up the room and all that stuff. And we shoot all of the content on that stage. What was crazy, here's another pivot moment, was there was a scheduling conflict, if you remember.
I do.
And there was some spice that happened behind the scenes.
I filmed it.
Yeah, he has video behind the scenes, bro. That was hilarious. Yeah, that's one thing I respect about you. Is like, you don't care about the situation. I'm gonna get my freaking.
It's a documentary at that point.
Yeah.
At that point, I still wasn't sure if we were going to finish this project.
Yeah. Dude.
I thought, if this is the ending that we have to go with, is my iPhone footage of this happening, it's actually going to be really funny.
It could be hilarious.
And
yeah,
I think that's the approach that I have to, especially the 48 hour, is like, life is absurd and sometimes you just have to embrace it.
Let's make something absurd.
Don't be upset that life hands you a box of lemons.
Yes.
Make some art out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So we pretty much got kicked out of that location, and which it ended up being for the good, because
absolutely.
We had to go to this other stage, and it was like the practice stage. So it played really well. It also gave us another location
for visual interest.
So it played really well. So I'm grateful that happened, actually. And then, we filmed, so it was all on that that same location. But I remember even, downstairs in the basement area, it took a while for us to set all the lights because it's you.
Right. We had a couple people that really didn't know a lot about what they were doing, but they were willing to help. So that was awesome.
Yeah, but the visuals and stuff, like, you knew where each light needed to go. And I have ideas, I have thoughts, but I'm not a DP. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm not sitting there like, what's going to really shape this room and what's going to separate our actors from backgrounds? Like, what's going to really make everything pop? And that's where your mind starts to really start going. And, I'm just sitting there, I'm like, we got to get going. It was 48-hour film festival, bro. We got to get this thing done. And then you see what the lights look like. You're like, oh, crap, that's why.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It takes time to set it right. And when you don't have a crew, By the way, sorry. Do you remember how many times I said sorry to you that day? I was like, bro, I'm so sorry, dude. Like, I'm relying on you so freaking heavily, man. Like, there's so much going on and all the visuals and everything. I apologize about 3,000
The results speak for themselves.
That's
up here
right.
on your wall here.
Yes. This is not even all of them. This is not even all of them. So we won multiple different awards, including cinematography, best cinematography. I can't even remember what's up there, to be honest with you. But we won best overall.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Best film, we got to go to Lisbon, which was super cool. Met some really cool people,
awesome.
dude.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of Lisbon, was all the cool people that we got to meet. Oh my gosh. So many people from different parts of the world that won in their region. And you just get to go chat with all these like professional filmmakers.
And people that wanted to make creative art. You
Yeah.
know, they're not movies that you'll see in Hollywood.
Exactly.
They're just like so unique and so fresh in a lot of ways, because they're all the best of the best that are working on volunteer crews throughout the world.
Yeah.
And so when you have that, it's not just people that are making like commerce.
Yeah.
They're making like art. So
it's about the art. And that's what really should be the foundation for filmmakers, man. You know, and a lot of times, especially in the media company world, they'll go into a project with like, okay, well, I'm going to bid it for this much and we're going to make a lot of money on it. You know what I mean? Really what the conversations to start with is, how am I going to tell your story?
right.
You know what I mean? And that's an art form of its own, because we are, as filmmakers, we're storytellers.
Right.
Whether that starts with the script or if that starts with lights, it's storytelling. And people, I wish people could understand it. People that are outside of it. Now, it does kind of ruin movies for us.
Absolutely.
You know, we'll be watching a movie and we're like, oh man, this is how they set that up and that's how they set that up. Or we'll ask, like, I wonder how the crap they did that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that stuff's intriguing to me, but you can't separate yourself from it, from always analyzing. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? But I wish for just a second people could understand what goes into creating a story visually. And I think that's kind of where I want to go next with like your methodology. Like what separates your style from maybe other DPs, and how do you go about building and creating a scene? And sometimes people can watch like one DP and know, well, that's cinematographer. I can tell what cinematographer that is by just the visuals. What would be the thing that kind of separates? I know that's a lot of questions. Maybe we'll just start with like, what's your methodology?
I love that question, because I think it is, your art is a reflection of who you are at that time that you make the art.
Yeah.
I don't think that you are your art. Like a lot of people think, oh, if someone criticizes my art, they're criticizing me. And then, you know, you get all butthurt about your ego being bruised.
Right.
And I'm just not like that. I'm just like, I'm going to make something that I believe is real and true for me and what I sort of am wrestling with. Or sometimes I think the questions are sometimes more interesting than the answers on a lot of things, whether it's philosophical or with art or, you know, and so films that have sort of like ambiguous endings, or I'm not as upset by those as like some people are, that you're just like, that wasn't a very satisfying ending.
Exactly.
And I think it used to be more so when I was younger. But I think what separates my art is, I was having a conversation with an actor friend of mine recently, and he was saying how actors are always told that you're the only person that can bring this character to life in this, you know, stage play or film or whatever. Sure. And I think on the crew side, we don't hear that maybe ever. Whether you're an art director or a DP or whatever, you don't hear that sort of affirmation as much. And I think that's a shame, because every person on set is bringing something of their entire life experience to put into this piece of art.
Absolutely.
And so that's where I think creating little groups of people that are in alignment creatively because you're all pulling the same direction, you know, but also having room for disagreements, you know, like you were talking about with the haze earlier, you know, it's deciding a hierarchy of values. Like, is this time that we spend here going to, you know, impede results if we have to do this other thing? Because I've been in that situation a lot, you know, as a DP, and sometimes you have to be the guardian of the image. Like you have to be like, this is something that I believe so strongly about that I'm willing to put my foot down here. And you can't do it too often because it's everybody's time. You know, it's not just my time. It's not just, you know, your time as a director. And so I try to be very mindful of that.
You're guarding your reputation too, because you want to be able to put your name on this.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If it's not like to the standard that you have in your mind, and you know that the image is going to be better if we take you know, 30 minutes to set this up, you have to guard that too.
And that is the constant battle of like trying to be a perfectionist or trying to get the best results possible. Cause like, I don't think any film that I've worked on has been 100% of our creative vision, right? Like I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like,
and most of the time I even enjoy that. I love it when we have an idea and things change, and I love seeing that change because to me, it means collaboration.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's everybody working together. And oftentimes in my experience, the image is even better than what I had imagined.
Absolutely.
You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been in that situation a lot of times. Like I've had a camera go down on set one time because of a cable getting, like a pin in the cable broke, and we weren't able to like format the card. And you know, we had like 2 hours of downtime.
Yeah.
And that is like an eternity on set, you know, because you're like, you have 12 hours to get everything. And if you're working on that time crunch, you just think, oh, this is the end of the world, you know? And so while we had that downtime, the director and I started combining, we had a shot list, and we started combining all of these different shots. Yeah. And we were able to basically capture everything that we needed, which was, honestly, it was just a miracle that like all of those things worked out. We missed one shot that we had to go back, and it was a close-up insert shot to break up 2 of those combined shots. But because we did it that way, the film has a little bit slower pace, but it fit what we were trying to achieve. And that film ended up winning a Heartland Emmy. So that was Little Dead with Ben Richardson. He was my roommate now, but he's director. We're trying to get that off the ground as like a feature film. And so like, you never know what those sort of challenges can force you into better decisions.
Absolutely.
Creatively. And like, same thing happened with Never Fade, you know, like with the shot at the end that you were very, very passionate about, like ending on that frame of her with in the mirror.
Screams in the mirror.
Exactly. Yeah. And that shot was very difficult to get because like
extremely difficult.
And, but we got it. And you know, I think that sold the ending for a lot of people.
So many people mentioned that scene specifically because, you know, she's putting like on the story side, like she's giving herself away to this intelligence, this artificial intelligence, you know, giving part of her soul away. You're putting herself in the box, essentially. Right. And so showing that visually, how do you convey that visually? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can't fit her in there. So what we do is we had a mirror, you know, Jordan Vineyard, friend of mine, production designer on that, built this box, put a mirror on it. And we had these daggum PVC pipe. There's a picture of it. We'll put it up if we find it. PVC pipe little tracks. You remember this?
Yes.
And they were rolling around. They were moving. They weren't perfectly still. And pushing in and closing that, you know, we had a super clear string that we would close the box with, and seeing that movement perfectly. I don't know how many takes we took. I mean, it was so many times, but that was it though. We needed that to fit the story, you know, and it turned out. So, but yeah, no, it's those are great points. I think the fact that so many times, you know, you get on set, I call it kind of refining in fire, because you go through the situations where you don't know, like, how am I going to get through this? It could be a broken camera, or it could be an actor shows up late, or it could literally be anything. And you literally only have 12 hours, or you're paying crew overtime. And at that point, it's beyond overtime at that point. It's like exhaustion because you got another day and stuff afterwards. And so there's more going on there. But how do you pivot and how do you get past those things and not compromise on the visuals? You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? And so I remember one feature I worked on, the director, we didn't have enough time to do typical coverage. And it would have taken days for this. It was a car chase scene. And the director was like, let's just shoot it as a oneer. So he gets in the back. It's pretty epic.
Nice.
It's Josh Caldwell. We were friends on set and everything, and he was kind of describing this, like the thought process and how you can do so much more with that oneer, and even the perspective that the viewer gets because of it. You feel like you're in it.
Right.
You feel like you're in the scene. So he was in the back. I mean, literally in the back of the car, and they're doing the shoot 'em up stuff out the back, and I mean, it was crazy. But
I love a good oneer.
oh man, it was so much fun. I think it maybe took 3 takes. You're done. It would have taken, if you had the coverage of a typical scene, like 2 days.
Absolutely. Well, action scenes like that just take a lot of
man.
lot of coverage or a lot of planning or both. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like
Yeah.
those can take so long, and each setup could be a completely different lighting setup, different camera angles, like multiple camera angles. You know, if you have explosions, you might have 17 cameras or whatever. You know, it's like, I'd love to do more of that. If anybody has any
100%,
action
let's
films,
go.
especially if it's action comedy or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
Those things are
right up my
fun.
alley.
Those things are fun. But if you don't have the time to
Right.
do it, you don't have the time. And sometimes it's a budget thing. There's so many different, people don't realize that aspect too. So
it's the time issue.
the time and the budget that affects creative process too.
Right.
You know, so you may have a vision for a scene as a director of photography, and you talk to the director, like, okay, what if we did this? And you get completely blocked by, oh, we don't have that kind of time.
Right.
We only have 5 hours to get this scene. You know what I mean? And you're like, well, what the heck? This is a really key scene. Like, what are we going to do? And then you have to just pivot. You pivot, but also not compromise.
Right.
So what is that like in your mind whenever you go through like a fire like that? Like what was your process on like thinking through a scene when you have so many restrictions?
So I did a film in 2022 called What Rhymes with Reason, and it's a teen adventure movie along the lines of like The Breakfast Club or The Goonies.
Yeah. That was Kyle's.
Yeah, Kyle Roberts is a director. We worked together for well over a decade, and great guy. We've done a lot of commercial work together, but this was like our first real feature together. We had shot his first feature in 2014. It was kind of like a first AC / second unit director of photography, and so like that shorthand that we have developed over the years of working together, I think is so valuable. Like you can't cheat that sort of like time working together. And you and I have kind of experienced a similar
you start
thing.
having this connection where you kind of know each other's thoughts.
You know what that person's style is, what
Yes.
they like, what they probably won't like,
Right.
and what they might ask for. And I think those are all like crucial elements to those creative relationships.
Yeah.
And when we were working on that film, initially we had a little bit more budget. We were going to shoot like 26 days, but it ended up being an 18-day shoot with 16 locations, mostly exteriors. And if you know that from and also an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
So you're trying to get wide shots of all these pieces. We didn't have a huge budget to do these big overheads or, so you just have to find out. You have to do a lot of location scouting. You have to do the prep work to know what it's going to be like, no matter what situation you're going to be in. And that's really stressful, actually. But I love the problem solving aspect of being a filmmaker. So there was so many scenes in that film that, we had made plans for. We had this big prom scene at the end, and it actually I was terrified going into it because I was like, this is like a massive setup. We had to do this whole school dance with 100 extras or a couple hundred extras, and just doing the stage lighting and all these pieces and not having a huge G&E crew. So I was like, okay, we need a prep day for this, for them. And like I said, 18 days, 16 locations. I remember making a shot list initially, and this is stuff that I had talked with Kyle about, and he is very open to like me doing a lot of that, where, you know, some directors, they'll have the whole vision kind of planned out and then, you know, kind of adapt to that. Sure. So each director has a little bit different working mentality when it comes to the visuals. But I had created this intricate shot list, and on like day 3, I was just like, because I was like, we're never going to get all this coverage.
No.
And it started becoming more like an intuitive process, like trying to be in the moment. Because I think that is it's very difficult to say, here's the movie that I have in my head of what I would love to achieve creatively. And here's the resources that we have to develop with. Instead of, I like to say, it's kind of like going with the grain, like this table, right? Like it has the dark parts of the wood, and then it has the light parts of the wood. And if you go with the grain, if you say, okay, this is just how this process is going to be, like you don't probably get out stain and try to make this match that. And, you know, it ends up being like this kind of like patchwork mess, right? Because you're trying to work against what something is trying to be. And instead of being like, okay, here are the limitations that are set for us. How can we lean into those instead of trying to ignore them or trying to push back against this tsunami that we know is going to take us out of the time and budgetary constraints that we have, but also make the best possible piece of art we can with, you know, that. So
sometimes the limitation of being in the box can be a benefit.
Absolutely.
You know? And if you have all the time in the world and, you know, money isn't an object and all of that stuff, sometimes having the limitations brings out even better art in some occasions. Not every time.
Definitely.
But sometimes those limitations really kind of refine what you're doing. And you have to pivot to the restrictions that you have. I mean, and a lot of people that may be watching this are not filmmakers. So those restrictions, there's so many of them, and you have to balance all of it.
Right.
So like location is a restriction. Well, we only have this location. Do we own that part of the street? Nope. Can't go over there. Okay. Well, I can't get this lens out and shoot this like I really want it. So let's find something else. Okay. How about time? Well, I only have 12 hours, so I can't set up all this random stuff and move these vehicles and do all of these things. And then money is a big one too. People don't think about the money side. We only have actors for half a day today.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we got to shoot this scene now. But I really needed to set this up, and I wanted to make it look even better. So you always are constantly pivoting. You're constantly changing. And so many times I've found, now there have been many times, I'm sure in your experience too, where those limitations have hurt the image. You know what I mean? And I think for directors, it's good to listen. And you know, first ADs and producers to listen when a DP comes to them and says, listen, this is not working. This is going to be garbage. This is a throwaway scene unless you give me more time on this. You know what I mean? So a lot of times I think it'd be a benefit for like for myself, whenever you really put your foot down on the haze and the certain lighting on the 48, and you said, really, trust me. And sure enough, it changed the scene, changed the whole feel of the scene. And so a lot of times we should be open, directors should be open, producers, to what the DP, the cinematographer, has to say when they're really putting their foot down. You know what I mean? Because you guys try to work with the limitations. And we all understand that we have to get through this day. We have 12 hours, let's get through it. And we got to move on to the next thing. But within those limitations, you have to be reasonable too, because if you're compromising on the ultimate image, you've ruined the whole purpose of why we're here.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, so it's fascinating because there are so many different elements. You know, a grumpy actor.
Yep.
You know, that's not cooperating. The makeup's taking longer than what we thought it would. There's so many different things that go into this, you know. And how do we, as the director and the director of photography, make it work. And I wish people could just hang out on set for a day, you know, and if anyone watching too has, you know, an opportunity to do that,
Yeah.
do it. Because I feel like there's a lack of, I wouldn't say it's a lack of respect. I think it's a lack of knowledge of what goes into creating a movie or short film or music video or whatever that is, on even the prep, the time it takes to prep a scene. I remember sitting down with you for Push Our Luck, and we spent so much time at the coffee shop at Viridian that we ended up going to your parents' house. She cooked dinner. Love your mom, by the way. She just cooked dinner for us. It was awesome. And we sat down and we just drew out scenes, and we went to online to find inspiration for different lighting techniques and things like that. There's so much prep work that people don't even understand. You know what I mean?
Right.
I wish people could just kind of be a fly on the wall and see what goes into it.
The way that I like to view the creative process is it's kind of like this maze or like labyrinth, right?
Yeah.
You don't know where the ending is when you enter the maze, right?
Yeah.
Like you're constantly taking a left turn, right turn, and then trying not to retrace where you just came from, right? Like if you can avoid that, and the more experience that you have going through that maze, right?
Yeah.
The quicker you are to getting the answer. And sometimes if you're tall like me, you can just look over the wall and see exactly where you're supposed to go. No. But I think that is the approach. And like, if you let your intuition kind of guide you,
Yeah.
and not being so stuck to the plan, I think it's very crucial to create as detailed a plan as you can possibly do prior to getting to set. Exactly. So that's why I like being at the location, so I can imagine what it's going to look like and where the sun's going to be and any possible angles that I might not have time to think of on the day, because you have a million other things to think about while you're actually making the film.
Yeah.
But when it's just you and the director or whoever, just imagining the possibilities, that's where a lot of the creativity starts to, when it's not under pressure, but you have time to like let it breathe and imagine possibility.
Right. Yes. You have the time to kind of sit there and mull a scene over, and what is the director really, or what's the script of the director? What are they really trying to convey here? And how could the visuals impact those things? Yeah. People don't think about that side. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But with the knowledge though, just like what we were talking about earlier, when I get on set on the day, there's going to be 1,000 things that change. You know what I mean? Right. So this is the ideal, knowing that that's going to change, but at least this is our direction. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, okay. So on an even a little bit deeper level, I know that, like, for example, we've done some corporate stuff. Like we did one a month ago or whatever. And that obviously has a totally different look than what Never Fade would have, or Darcy's Push Our Luck, or any of that stuff. What would be, in your mind, what would be like your ideal image? Like, is it more contrasty? Is it like, what, we could talk a little bit more about colors and things like that. We don't have to go into super detail, but what would you say, like, if this was the ideal project that you were working on, what would your style be?
So I'm going to sound like a real artist here.
Okay.
Whatever is right for the story, right? So like sometimes you want something that's colorful and bright and poppy and like that is for that particular type of story. You know, usually it's comedy, it's bright and everything's happy and you have this high key lighting.
Sure.
And sometimes it's, sometimes you take a darker subject and flip the script on the visuals of it, or vice versa. You know, you have this dark comedy or whatever, and it's like, how can we lean into what the themes are in this film?
Yes,
and that is what motivates everything else about mood boards. How I want something to feel. Like when I listen to Darcy's Push Our Luck song.
Yeah. I'm
thinking about, how does this song make me feel? First of all, I'm not even thinking about visuals.
Yeah.
And that's how I approach a script too. Is like, how does this scene or this character make me feel in this moment? I'm trying to like shut out all the, because I am a very visual person, and I'm trying to think of like, okay, what does this look like? But usually the first time I'm reading through it, it's just like purely, how do I feel emotionally? What are the signals that I'm picking up? And that is, it's a very difficult process, like as a man, sometimes you're like, emotions are the enemy. The only
feelings.
The only emotion that I ever feel is anger. It's like deep existential dread.
Yes,
Like
100%.
that's my childhood. But so like once you get to a place where you are in tune with all of that, you can let that inform how you want to approach that visually.
Yeah.
And
that's a great point.
Mud is one of my favorite movies as far as like an exploration on a theme with Matthew McConaughey and Reese Witherspoon. Yeah. And there's this one scene where in the film, there's a character and his dad is getting a divorce, and he is center framed with his back to the camera, and he's talking over his shoulder like to his son and telling him that he's breaking up with his mom. He's not going to be a part of his life anymore. Yeah. And the way that they approach that visually, I'm like, what a great interaction. It's a terrible situation that a lot of people have had to live through. But it just makes you think, like, I am feeling the separation as a person watching this, as an audience member, of that disconnect, that he is leaving with his son as he's walking out on his family. And I love when a film can make you feel that way. And as a cinematographer, I'm like, brilliant choice by the director of photography and the director to not make that a two shot, or not to connect those characters in any way. Yeah. There's a obvious disconnect, and it's not only in the dialogue, but you feel that visually. Yes. And that is what I hope to achieve with my cinematography, is like capture the feeling of whatever that theme or that feeling that is part of that scene, whether it's character interaction. One of the things that we did in What Rhymes with Reason, for instance, is we had two characters, a brother and sister, that they don't see eye to eye on most things in life. And they go through a very dark tragedy together, and we always do what's called short sighting, where instead of letting them have space in front of their face when you frame them speaking to each other, we would always put the frame close to their nose, so it's like they're talking to a wall almost. And we intentionally did that for every conversation that those two characters had with each other until the ending, where they have a reconciliation, where they come together, and you feel that so much. And honestly, that scene where they come together at the ending is my favorite scene in the whole movie, because it feels so earned and so powerful. And the actors did such an amazing job portraying that sort of like reconciliation after all of this constant tension that they had built up over the course of the film. So like, I don't know if we do that perfectly, as artists, but that's the approach. And that was a decision we made early on in pre-production, because we're like, these characters are always like at odds, and how do we show that visually,
Dude, excellent answer. Love that. So many people don't realize how their emotions are being affected by the cinematography, by how the camera is framed, how it's lit.
Color.
So many different colors, a big one. There was a
saturation even.
Oh yeah. There was a Russian filmmaker a long time ago, Eisenstein or something like that. He said filmmaking is a great tool for propaganda. So we obviously want to use our skill for good, but you can use it for propaganda because, one, you can target people emotions, target their emotions. Then you can affect their reason, right? So really, even the framing, the color, how the image is perceived and the story is molded, you can change how people think about something. Right. And want to use it for good, obviously, but even the emotion side, okay? How can you change someone's emotions by how you frame a freaking camera? People don't even think about that. So like color too, obviously more blues are more cold and sad. So if someone's weeping on camera, you don't want a super warm, high key image. You want it to feel you want to feel sad along with them.
Right.
Right. You don't want the emotions to be contrasting. You want the viewer to feel those things with them.
Right.
So even, yeah, you're right. I mean, when you have a point in the script, like what's the mood of this scene? Mm-hmm. And how can the way that the lights and the camera is angled, how can everything help move that emotion along? You know what I mean?
Right. And that goes to the score and everything else, man. The set design.
Yeah.
So I did a film that was, it starts off kind of like a fun lunch date, and then it becomes like this dramatic thriller. And we did this thing where it's set in one location. The short film is called Olive, and over the course of the film, even though you're seeing a lot of the similar shots and such, we start off with a very bright, high saturation, like colorful, and so as the film goes on, there's like this pivot, and then it starts becoming desaturated, a little bit like more contrasty, a little scarier. And the trick to that as a colorist, as a director, is not to let the audience know exactly where the magic trick, the turn is.
Yes.
You know, because it can feel like a clean break, and some people do that, the jump cuts or whatever, and are jump scares, and that can work in like horror, you know, certain genres. But the best, I think, is the most subtle approach, where you are bringing them through this thing where they, you know, you're world building, right? Yeah. And so like if you can't carry them through, I always say that a film is only as strong as its weakest link, whether that's the editing or the acting or the script or the cinematography.
That's it.
If any one of those parts is weak or doesn't serve the story and the feeling that it's trying to bring across, then that person's going to go watch something else, because there's a million other things out there, you know, YouTube, all these streaming platforms. It's just like, it's so easy to lose attention. But if you really suck people in and you're telling this gripping story, they can't turn away, because it's like, it's compelling, you know, and it's cohesive. It's, you know, I'm sure we've all seen a movie where, you know, a character does something that's totally, you know, writing is just bad, and you're like, well, why would they do that? That doesn't make any logical sense. And or you know, an edit choice that you're like, well, that's I feel like, why do we end up here? And we were just in this other scene, and I suddenly care more about the side plot than I do about these main characters. And you're like, well,
you got to have the right
checked out
team, man. From the beginning to the end, you got to have the right team. So one of my favorite things, and we're just about finished here. Thank you, bro, for your time. And this is fascinating to me. Like, I could talk about this for days. This is awesome. One of the cool things that I remember, like, that early on when I was, you know, starting to look into cinematography, is how even like the cinematography and the camera can say a lot of words without saying anything. So, like, for example, in Harry Potter, when Malfoy, I can't remember his first name, comes up to Harry Potter, and there's this camera motion where everything was level, right? And now it works because Malfoy, he's taller and Harry Potter's shorter, but it goes immediately like this. Dutch angle.
Yep.
What does that immediately do? It tells the viewer, because it puts people on, like, off ease, right?
Yeah.
We're already doing this, like, something's up here. Without even saying a word, that's a bad guy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Without even saying a word, you could mute it and still know what was going on in the story. And I think scenes like that are freaking beautiful.
Right.
And so, the storytelling aspect of cinematography, bro, I'm telling you, it's fascinating to me. Okay. Any plugs that you want to do? So, like, any upcoming projects you want to talk about? And how can people find out more about what you do?
So, there's a lot of things that I would love to do. There's A Little Dead, the feature that we're trying to get made. Ben Richardson's directing that. All these projects need funding, you know, so it's like, it's, if you're an investor and you have, you know, some money to throw at a project, you know, hit us up and I'll plug you into the right people. Kyle Roberts, we've got a slate of 5 films that we're trying to make. So This is something we just pitched last week. There's a conference called NRB, National Religious Broadcasters. So we went down there and met with a bunch of different studios that are making faith-based content.
Awesome.
And he's very involved in like trying to tell family-friendly stories and love the guy. I love what he's trying to do. His mission is, I think, much needed. You know, like our film, What Rhymes with Reason, was about mental health issues, and how do you approach those topics that are so critical for the next generation? Because I think there's so much just nothing matters, and you know, doom scrolling and all these things that are affecting young people. And I think there's a disconnect with that, as well as with older generations of like, well, just get a job and do, you know, and it's like that, those channels for building meaning and purpose in your life aren't working like they used to in the past.
Right.
Maybe they never did, and we just have noticed it recently. And I think having that grounded sense of meaning and purpose in your life, I find that in like faith, you know, because I think at the end of the day, that's what matters, is like, how do you love God? How do you love other people? And how can you love people through your art? And it's not even about necessarily imbuing everything that you have with a message. Cause you know, we've all seen those films where it's like, let me make you agree with me on all of these issues. And I don't think that that's good art. You know, that is propaganda. And that is, when you approach things with love, I think you can persuade, them into it's an invitation, rather than a forceful, like, you will bow the knee to this ideology that I have, you know? And it's the same thing that I see with all these wars. It's like, well, it's easy to be gung ho about something that when you're not the one fighting on the front lines for it, you know? And I think if you do believe in something, you are fighting for it. And like I said, if you're making and doing things out of love, then you will make the best version of it, and you will find a way to overcome those mistakes. And it may not be on your first go. Like, you know, it takes time to let those things develop. It's like a plant, you know, it has time to grow.
Absolutely. And showing grace in those situations where, you know, it may not be going the way that you want it to, and showing grace to those people that, you know, maybe are problematic on set or whatever. But no, I couldn't agree with you more. I think even on the artistic side, you know, we're made in the image of God, and God is the greatest artist of all time. Look at creation, look at everything he's made. The stars, you know, declare the glory of God. I think those are beautiful passages. And as artists, how do we reflect his glory with the things that we make? And so taking the time to make a beautiful image, you know what I mean? Doing it as unto the Lord even. You know, how do I create something that is going to be pleasing? And then vetting projects, I think too. That was for me getting into it. You know, I'll take on any project, you know, and then I find myself in productions that I really don't want to be in.
Right.
You know
You're
what I mean?
building a skill set, but you're not
Exactly.
building content that you want to watch even.
Right. Exactly.
And that's what I feel as well. I love telling layered, meaningful stories. And anytime I can talk to a director or people that are making those kind of stories, I'm like, I'm here for it. That's why we connected. You know, like we have a lot of similar, you know, your story first, and I'm behind the visuals, and I have the same sort of energy for my visuals as you do for the story aspect. And so I think that's the connection there. And I think we can all serve in our own unique way. And I think so many people are scared right now of AI taking all of our jobs. And I just say, like, you just need to redefine what you think of as art, because if you are using something that's going to be a copy and make it the most efficient thing, then the AI will take your job. But if you are trying to innovate, you are trying to bring or create art that is an insight into the human condition, which is what I believe that good art does. There's a quote by Rick Rubin, who's like a music producer. He said, art without meaning is just decoration. And I think that is So if you're making something that's like an insight into the human condition, and that great art is like transcendent, like you're seeing a truth that can't even be quantified or explained, but sometimes you're just seeing it visually, or like architecture, right? Like it just is awe-inspiring, you know, like the Sistine Chapel or these other things.
Yeah.
And I think that is what I find is so compelling about what we do.
Absolutely. Dude, beautiful. Last thing, I just want to, dude, thank you for your time today. I have enjoyed working with you. Can't wait for future projects. Last thing I want to end with, you know, just real quick, how would you encourage people that are younger or trying to get into the cinematography world? How would you encourage these individuals to keep pushing, keep pursuing?
Well, I think the on-ramp has changed since we got in the game, right? Because I'm, you know, at my late 30s now. And now people have phones in their pocket with better cameras than we started out off with.
Oh,
and like orders of magnitude, you could shoot 4K with your phone. It's like crazy.
No, you couldn't shoot very good video with the Razor flip phone back in the
Exactly. And not to say that you couldn't make something compelling with that if you wanted to, right? You could shoot on Fruit by the Foot. If you had a good story, like people would still watch it.
Right.
And I think that you can be held back by your lack of experience or your limitation of lighting gear or whatever. Learn the basics of what good storytelling is, why you want to create art. This is a deep introspective problem, in my opinion, is like you have to learn yourself and what you like in order to create good art. Because if you just make stuff to try and appeal to an audience you think exists, you're not really doing the world a service. You know, the greatest art I feel like is a process of finding out what you want to see and then creating that from the love of the process.
Yeah. Love it, man. You got to find out who you are.
That's a very philosophical answer, but
that's great though.
I think you start with that and then you can create something great.
Absolutely.
But there's no shame in making, you know, Lego stop motion videos either. So
no, absolutely.
make the dumb stuff too.
Yes,
you know,
dude. Yeah, the Star Wars action figures to Jukebox Hero, bro. Yep. No, dude. Thank you for your time. Seriously, appreciate you. How can people find out about more of what you do? Is it a website or a social media handle? Or
my website is smithpixels.com, and then follow me on Instagram, Die Tall.
Sweet. Die tall, bro. Yep. Heck yeah, bro. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, bro.